Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales and Wall Street. An XDC Zinfin video for you guys today. Some massive news out of the last 24 hours. Once again, the UK is flying forwards with bills and regulations and laws, this time through trade financial agreements and bills being passed through, signed by the King himself. Guys, before we go into that, don't forget to smash that subscribe button if you have not done so already, and we will indeed get started with this video. Absolutely fantastic information coming out over the last 24 hours. The Electronic Trade Documents Act 2023 has been passed and signed by the government and of course the King himself. Last updated 8 a.m. this morning. Absolutely crazy. The last amendments through the Commons on 11th of July, this has been passed through now. It's breaking across a multitude of media centres as we speak. This is phenomenal. This really opens up the massive conversation of trade finance, guys. Trade finance can have a multitude of variables within this sector and system. We've talked about a multitude of times with multiple projects involved, whether that be directly or indirectly. But in this particular instance, of course, Zinfin XDC will for sure have some valuable uptake on this, in my opinion. Obviously, in a bull cycle, it would be even more so. But it's not just XDC Zinfins, of course. There's a multitude of projects and companies out there that have been working hard behind the scenes for not just these kind of agreements, but very much enhancing the trade finance systems. Now, as I said, the trade finance market can be pulled across in a multitude of avenues. We talked about things like supply chain management, in the way as well of how currencies can be transformed in cross-border payments, how we can finalize payments across the board. In fact, here's a great rendition of this trade finance as a description: the financial instruments and products that are used by companies to facilitate international trade and commerce. Now, of course, we've talked about a multitude of times, the global trade market, guys, stands around roughly $25 trillion. This is humongous. So the market opportunity is huge, as it already is. And that, by the way, data, I believe, is about a year or so old now, right? But my point being here is that once you start integrating gigantic technology like with blockchain in terms of its verification, processing, validating, you name it, across the board, speeds that process up significantly. Then the integration of things like AI, algorithmic data. We talk about this a lot on the channel in terms of supply and demand mechanisms. Things like taking things out of your fridge, it tells the whole system that needs to be replaced. Drones are harvesting and seeding by themselves based on algorithm data supplied by AI, but also transacted and validated with the utilization of blockchain technology and other frameworks like APIs. APIs are obviously huge in things like the supply chain management markets, which stands at around 15 billion currently. This is going to supersede itself number-wise over the next 5-6 years as well. But when now we have this kind of application on top of it, it's going to accelerate even faster than we ever could have perceived in our heads. It's been on the cards for a long, long time, and we talked about it probably since the early dawn of this channel, albeit only a couple of years ago. It's certainly something I've been following for the many, many years. I've been calling it and looking at it as kind of like a blockchain bill, if you like, and it's quite ironic. Certainly within this article where we talked about some of the House of Commons quotations was about the blockchain bill. And that's what I've always tried to call it, because I do believe that that ultimately is what's powering everything, amongst a couple of other areas and frameworks and technologies as well. But blockchain would be one of the humongous things behind this, and digitalizing things like smart contracts is absolutely massively important when we're talking about trade agreements, but also the facilitation of things. We go back to this point where it says here about facilitating these elements. It's not just about the conclusive measure of building contracts between a company and a company, whether it be internally as a nation or working with other companies around the world. Smart contract ability is absolutely gigantic. And certainly something that arguably with some technologies now boasting that they can amend smart contracts as time goes by. The ultimate factor is that this speeds up transactions, it speeds up processing, less admin, potentially less people, more automation, and that, as I said, building that within the frameworks of AI, which, don't get me wrong, AI regulation is on the cusp, guys. It will be coming very soon because it has to do. It has to work with all these systems that are being put in place and with regulatory aspects and law behind it as well. Who decides that is another question. We know the conversations are ongoing, but hopefully, from the previous videos we talked about many times over the last 2 years about trade finance, this, that, and the other. As I said, I don't just do these for fun. I do them to try and educate people. Hopefully more and more people will realize what's going on, especially now it's in the main public domain that these are now arguably regulated and signed off by the king himself as law. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. The Innovation Hub built in London here a couple of years ago, promoted by Rishi Sunak. I will refer again. I did a video about 2 years ago saying Sunak would be the next Prime Minister and King Charles will be there to promote everything. They're all obviously historic members of the World Economic Forum who talk about a multitude of areas around the world, of course, but one of those big things about trade finance, how can it be profitable, how can it be improved upon, and there's big consultations and information constantly around things about the improvements of trade finance. Here, this was from a couple of years ago, of course. The first of such transactions we successfully concluded with the trade tech distribution technology and the blockchain platform provided by XDC network. I thought I'd throw that in there because obviously XDC has massive integrations with the global trade finance agreements. We can loop even that back to these guys who, of course, Andre Casterman is part of the XDC framework in terms of certainly from a consultancy perspective and an advisory perspective, amongst all the other things that he does as well. Historic, massive background in finance and Swift, but he is obviously part of the trade finance global memberships as well. Can you see the dot connecting, guys? Can you see what is going on here? And as I said, it's not just XDC, there's loads of other ones as well. We've always talked about the TFD initiative, which is pretty much a branch of so many different cool companies out there, all coming together, including ones we all know very well through banking systems, etc. So it's all concluding itself, guys. We're getting to a point where it's very interesting, where, as I said, in a bull market, this could be going absolutely bonkers right now. Of course, there will be movements in price like we saw with XRP and their settlement with the SEC, or certainly clarification at least about the securities element. But that can for sure be accelerated in the future. My main point, and more interestingly from a technological perspective, the utilization perspective, we're in a very interesting period of time, guys. 2025 is the anticipation of the new RTGS system being implemented, which is about the whole entire shuffle of the financial system, the Great Reset, the fourth industrial revolution, the full integration of AI and blockchain is here in our lifetime. It's crazy. And I sound maybe a bit animated and excited right now, and that's purely for the fact that it's great finally to see all the things that we talk about and people sort of and ah about it or go, oh, maybe it won't happen, it will happen. I know that this all coming, it's just a question of when. And then out of nowhere, all these big announcements come out. Look what we've seen, and we covered this with Lewis Jackson on his podcast the other week, about the timing of all this. There's now regulation here, law in the UK about cryptocurrency, stablecoin usage from the general public and businesses in general. Now we're seeing the Trade Finance Act from electronic bills. This is absolutely huge, guys. I'll read a couple of passages here. I don't like to tend to just read off pages for our video content, but I think it's a massive thing to talk about, guys. So we can start seeing this. This is a small change in the law with the potential to make a colossal impact, unleashing innovation and investment in digital trade solutions and delivering significant economic and environmental benefits. Now, if you can fast forward 12 to 18 months' time, inflation reduces, interest rates reduce, CBDCs start coming a massive topic conversation around the world and certainly in the general public domain as a solution. This is going to be the solution as well for trade finance. It will make it easier as consumers, as businesses, to trade with other countries, other businesses around the world where there's perhaps been conflicts of currency exchange rates, the speed at which of validating and processing payments can all be done within milliseconds instead of days now. And can you imagine the economy's increase with all this magnitude of things happening? The other thing as well to consider, if we think about going back to that point about inflation, one point to really mention and conclude here is about the gap. The gap in terms of the trade finance area. There's a $6.5 trillion gap at the moment, and that's mainly around sort of commodities, obviously inflated prices of commodities. There's various reasons behind that, but I will revert back to the topic I always kind of try to mention is they already have the solution. Let's create some problems, put in the solution, and then it just becomes normality. Now, whether we become dependent on that is another question, but the fact of the matter is we are talking about industry evolution here. And it has been talked about for a long time. This is not something that just click your fingers and happens overnight and it's a secret or oh, wow, this has come out of nowhere. We've been talking about this a long time. And that's not just to say about our channel, like loads of people talk about this, certainly from that industry level. It's just whether we pay attention to it or not, or whether we educate ourselves or not, or indeed if we even find out. And that's the crazy thing right now is we're on the cusp of something so crazy in terms of the change that the world is going to see. And as I said many times, 90% of the population won't have a clue any of this is happening. They won't have any clue about the terminologies of what's going on. The fact of the matter is they'll probably just have to use it. It'll just happen and it'll just become a normality. But from people who invest like us or have a general interest like myself in blockchain technology, cryptography, that's why I did my diploma a few years ago in blockchain cryptography. It's absolutely fascinating to see the building blocks of how it all works. My integration of knowledge and expertise through my career of artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, IoT, supply chain distribution, in my head it was all concluding together and I could see, not the future, I don't have a crystal ball, but I could start seeing the pattern. And when I understood and learned about blockchain, I was like, this is how they're going to do it. This totally makes sense in my head now, which is why I started the channel, why I started the enthusiasm and passion in this kind of area. There are pros, there are cons, but the fact of the matter is, guys, this is something gigantically huge. This one here is also to take note here. There's been a slight change of different titles towards these certain bills, but it's important to understand that actually they're all concluding themselves. We see some of the new energy bills coming through. This will be heavily incorporated with blockchain that we talk about significantly on this channel. Companies like Power Ledger, Energy Web Foundation, of course, other chains that are focusing on this now, like Hedera, Hashgraph, Algorand. It's going to be absolutely huge these coming years, guys. And the fact of the matter is that people are in place. I've said this multitude of times. The World Economic Forum membership and graduate leadership program is absolutely huge. Pretty much everyone around the world right now in a powerful state, whether that's a king, a president, a prime minister, whatever, they're all in place now. And they're all signing off crypto bills. They're all signing off regulatory laws and bills and regulations of everything related to blockchain technology and eventually, very soon, AI as well. We have to keep an eye on this. But from XDC's perspective, this is absolutely huge as well. We talked about this multitude of times with the XDC network being a huge innovator in the way that tokens can be utilized. So tokenization of assets, tokenization of smart contracts, and of course, finance and produce, products, everything in general as well. This is how it kind of takes advantage of this. But particularly as well, trade finance in general, not just supply chain mechanisms, things like that, but finance itself is going to be absolutely huge. So we say here, this is kind of like a brief overview of the different areas. Blockchain offers many possibilities to improve global trade. The massive trade industry will gain from blockchain over time through such benefits as operational efficiencies created by digitalized bills of lading, supply chain automation, risk management solutions, new capital markets, and improved access for SMEs, particularly a focus that has already been built on the XDC network. It's been absolutely fantastic to see this development. It actually says here about a trade finance gap. The gap that I was talking about was a load of other different things as well, but that in itself is a huge number. The $6.5 trillion gap represents a bigger area, all the different kind of variables within trade, global trade in general and trade finance together. It shows you the dimension of this, the opportunity, and to fix that gap, what's the solution? The solution was blockchain and the ecosystems and infrastructures within that, or working with blockchain technology, to bring these to the table. It's in our faces, guys, right now. It's come to a conclusion to an extent, and now's the time over these next 12, 18 months leading to 2025 into 2030, hence the UN agenda programs, or the documentation which you can download off their websites. This is all part of the process and planning, guys. Time is running out. 2023, it's only 6.5 years away. It's going to come around fast, but for sure these next 2 years with the implementation of digitalization, tokenization, AI, blockchain, it's all here, guys. It's so clear in our heads now what is happening, and more to learn, more to come for sure as time goes by. But the signals are there, the dot connecting, hopefully you're doing more and more of yourselves as well. I try and do my best with the videos and the time that we have in these frameworks, but it's absolutely fascinating, guys. All of the old acts that get replaced or certainly integrated within this as well is going to change the world, guys. And even countries that had maybe limitations on supply chain or trade finance are going to suddenly come out of emergence, out of the sand, out of the water, and really define this crazy new world that we're entering. The fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, is massively in play right now, through obviously massive guidance from the World Economic Forum and other organizations. It's here, guys. MLETR, obviously absolutely huge part of this as well. Documentation, paper-based processing, paper-based documentation is such a time-consuming effort, people-consuming effort, energy, everything. And blockchain wipes it all out. Absolutely crazy to see this in front of our eyes happening, guys. And there's loads of other benefits and interesting facts that are coming into this article. Please do read it. It's absolutely fascinating to go into more detail about this. 3 million trees say thank you. Again, part of the big initial green initiative, climate change, ESGs. How much more do I need to throw out here? Guys, let's go into the chart and have a look at XDC's price point. Before I fall off my chair with excitement, it's been an absolute crazy roller coaster these last few weeks in terms of information that's been coming out, certainly from the regulatory and law perspectives. The XDC price point has of course shifted over the last few days with anticipation of this law being passed, and of course its link up with XDC Network's ability and frameworks that it has been building within this sector and space. Now, I don't know why, but my previous fib retracement levels have appeared to have disappeared. You can just about see one of them from one of the last videos that we did, and it kind of reflects really as to where we are at the moment with this price movement. So you can see that we closed yesterday around this 4 cent mark. It's done a bit of an upward trend. As this news comes out, it might trickle itself back up to 5 cents. We'll have to see. It hasn't done that since April earlier this year. Before that, we were pretty much in a big downward trend of XDC, as most markets have shown anyway. But if I just very quickly throw in a fib level from the big top level there and one of the short ones, you can clearly see that we are still relatively not too far off that first level of the fib retracement. It's going to take a bit of a cycle uptake in general for the whole market for us to start seeing those higher numbers. But as that news retrieves into the sphere of social media, etc., could we get above those lines? We're not far off it, still a cent to go. As I said, the last high points were around 4.5 cents, around 17th of April. Before that, we had those higher markers back in May 2022 that were floating around that 6-7 mark, as we just mentioned, and some of those higher regions all the way up to 19 cents. So there's our marker for the next big bull cycle. I don't anticipate that happening in the short term, perhaps maybe next year into 2025, as I said, all the other variables kicking in potentially at that similar time. But in this conclusive area right now, in fact, I'm just going to drop this slightly so we've got a bit more data in the macro medium level, taking us from December to one of the most recent high points. You can see that this is the area of focus at the moment, 4 cents. This is the area that we're trying to achieve, 4.5 cents. If we go over this level, it's going to take a lot of volume to come in to push us to 6.5, in my opinion. So I could anticipate that we see this barrier at 4.5 where there could be a lot of volatility, or at least testing potentially. But regardless, in a short-term mode, if you're a short-term trader, I'm a long-term holder of XDC, by the way. I don't tend to sell unless I see significant levels way beyond 10 cents, at least from the buying positions that I've had over the last few months of 2 cents, 3 cents, etc. It's quite ironic, actually. Literally 2 days ago, I was like, I should probably add some more XDC. with no obviously visual of what we were going to see news-wise in the last 24, 48 hours. But at that 3 cent mark, I was like, oh, I wish it would come down a bit lower, but 3 cents is still respectable to where I think the XDC price could get to in the future. And that argument still stands, albeit in a short-term method. You do obviously want to DCA correctly and have a bit of a risk removement strategy, in the sense that actually we need to just understand that this is on an uptake. 77 on the 14-day RSI at the bottom left there, 28 days showing 66. So I'd be pretty crazy if I jumped in right now, in my honest opinion. That's not financial advice, just me personally. So I will be waiting. If it goes up any higher, I may start considering some sell-off positions just to take advantage of that short-term market. As I said, I don't tend to do trades, but in some of these instances, you'd be partially silly not to, in my honest opinion, because it's an opportunity for when it comes back down to increase that accumulation without using my own money as such. So these are the areas of interest, guys. I think in the lower patterns, we won't probably see that for a few days now. But again, just keep an eye on those lower momentum areas. We've already drawn them in the past. I'm not going to draw loads more circles. But these are always areas of consideration for me, certainly around that 3.5 and 3 cent mark in general. I do have some position purchases areas. I think it's around 2.7 cents. It's around this market here, just in case. But again, we haven't seen those for a while. I think March was the last time. We'll have to see. But that could be something that happens like in maybe a month or so, or indeed a market crash in general, who knows. But XDC has performed very well. It's one of the most best performing assets, to be honest. I think more consideration towards it, there's more awareness, there's more understanding of its application and its utility. And we've certainly seen now as well in the last few days where people pick up this news and they go, oh my God, who's powering this stuff? Who's behind it? And they go and Google search and they find all the names like that you would expect, really. Well, of course, XDC is one of those ones, hence why there's been a bit of an influx of price over the last coming days. So it's no surprise. But yeah, that news kind of came out of nowhere for me. I knew it was on the cards. I've also been following it for a long time. But to actually see that cemented over the last day or two, and with work commitments, it's been pretty crazy to not have the full concentration. But absolutely fantastic to see it, guys, regardless. There's not much more I can say about the chart at the moment, to be honest, because we're on this uptake. It'd be a bit silly to kind of show any more dimension than that. But I've put some areas of interest on there, certainly based on data, but also the points of where I've got my buy orders in general anyway, and my anticipations for this. Let us know in the comments below what you think about XDC in general, this great interesting news of the laws passing here in the UK. I'm sure much more will happen across the world. That would increase the XDC point of price even further for sure. But it's even good to see just in the UK here, small line, we are obviously big influence in finance and trade, etc. That even just the UK's news has pushed it up that much. Imagine if we had the world switching all these things on simultaneously, or at least in small batches as well. This is where I think we'll start seeing that big bull cycle momentum, along with CBDCs, AI, etc., coming into fruition. The mass market jumps in even more so than it did a couple of years ago, and more so the 3 or 4 years before that. We could see some giant numbers, guys. Predictions of XDC for me, I'm not too much interested in that right now. But as I said, that definitely that minimalistic point of view of 20 cents is certainly a minimum market for me to be selling off as we break even on some of them as well. But also, more importantly, perhaps in that bigger bull cycle, we could branch ourselves up towards that 50 cents at least. I'd be surprised if it goes any higher than that, but if the adoption comes in and the utility continues, we could definitely for sure see that. In the long term, I definitely see XDC being in the dollars and dollars for sure. But for now, I'm just enjoying these lower moments to try and accumulate as much as I can. We'll see how it goes. But guys, thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it's been of interest. We'll see you in the next XDC update video. Take care. Bye-bye.